Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, of course, to the 46th Annual Cancer Control Society Convention, Labor Day weekend 2018. Lovely Hilton Hotel in Glendale, California. Our next speaker is returning after absence of a few years, but Carl Helvie, when we first met him, was talking about lung cancer because he is a recovered lung cancer patient. He's a nurse practitioner, I think for over 40 years, a doctor of public health, and author of books and articles. So it's wonderful to have Carl Helvie with us again this year.
I'm happy to be with you. Like Lorraine, I'm getting up there in years. I celebrated my 86th birthday last month. But I felt a need to come. In fact, the only traveling that I've done in 5 years was 2 Christmases I went to my sister's for Christmas, and I stayed 3 days. I didn't want to stay any longer. But I felt a need to come and connect with you and to make you aware of my Cancer Foundation, which is my passion now. And I'm always happy to talk with anyone. If they want to give me a call, or they want to email me, or they want to stop me on Facebook or wherever, I'm always happy to do that. And Frank mentioned that I'm a lung cancer survivor. It's actually, I celebrated July 21st, 44 years, and I refused chemo and surgery, which they offered me with a prognosis of 6 months. I used all natural, holistic interventions, never had a recurrence, and I think this speaks very highly of including God, optimism, being patient, helping others, etc., in our cancer treatments. I'm going to talk today. I wrote a book called Reducing Your Cancer Risk, a Holistic Approach to Make Money for My Cancer Foundation. What I have found is that that book does not sell very well, but my lung cancer book is still selling like crazy. I did a national program recently, CBS. I was on the bestseller list again for the lung cancer book, not for the prevention book, which is what I was talking about. I think people just don't have the time, and it's not a priority to look at prevention. So they wait until they get cancer, and then they don't have any alternative. So I think it's so important because the statistics show that 40% of all cancer can be prevented if we do the right things. And so I want to talk about some of those right things. Frank, which is it, the arrow that I pushed? Which one do I do? Right here? This one?
Yeah, you can use the arrows on the laptop if you like.
Oh, okay, good. And if I have to go back? Oh, great, good, great, thank you. Good, thank you. Today, 1 in every 2 people are at risk of having cancer. That is ridiculous. You know, but as I say, people just don't seem to have the time to look at prevention. And 40%, as I said, of those, according to the World Health Organization, are preventable. I always like to start with a conceptual framework. I guess that's my 45 years as a university professor. I always like to focus, but unfortunately when I am interviewed, and I was interviewed Friday and Saturday, and when I'm not interviewed, I've got so many thoughts that come and things trigger other things, and I'm all over the area. So it's good that I have something that occasionally focuses me. And so my framework that I used for the book and that I'm using today is a public health framework, and it looks at man, agent, and the environment, and says that there are multiple factors in man, the agent, and the environment that lead up to the health or illness processes. And when you have illness, it's a result of a weak host, a strong agent, and an unfavorable environment. So that there's actually two. Oh, and second, that it's possible to intervene in this process at various levels. You can intervene before the human is exposed to cancer, which is primary prevention. You can intervene after they're exposed, but at an early stage in the process, which would be like stage 1 and 2 of cancer. Or you can intervene at stage 3 or 4, which is more difficult to treat, etc. So the focus of the book is on primary prevention. To re-emphasize, there are two things that you need to do. One is to reduce or eliminate the agent environmental factors in your environment. And at the same time, you need to build the resistance of the host. And someone mentioned that someone earlier did not speak about nutrition. And nutrition is one of the most important aspects when it comes to cancer. But to my surprise, exercise is even more important. The categories to reduce the agent and environmental factors in your environment would be things like carcinogenic chemicals, carcinogenic metals, ultraviolet light, and electromagnetic frequency waves. Examples of a carcinogenic chemical would be bisphenol A or BPA, which is plastic. And you see now, 20 years ago, you didn't see people running around with their bottled water. Today, everyone, and especially when you go to Europe, everyone has their bottled water. But what happens is there's BPA in the plastic, and if they transport that water to the distribution centers, the water melts, and it's in the summer and there's no air conditioning. The water leaches into the water, and then you drink that carcinogen. So there's more and more companies that are coming out with BPA-free bottles. I recently at Whole Food found 2-gallon containers that I can take now and buy my water at Whole Food. Or Amy's has done a great job, because another place that you'll find BPA is in food cans, canned foods, and Amy's have BPA linings in their products now, so that's much better for the human. A lot of people use plastic eating utensils. Again, you should change to stainless steel or sterling or whatever. Another example would be ultraviolet waves of environmental factors to reduce. These would be your tanning beds in the sun. You need a certain amount of vitamin D, because it's been found that cancer patients, about 75%, have low vitamin D. So you need a certain amount of sunshine, but too much can lead to skin cancer, especially melanoma, according to the cancer research. Things you should do would be to limit your time in the sun, especially midday. If you can't limit, to wear protective clothing. One thing I found interesting is that if you eat high antioxidant foods, you can reduce the damage from the sun, and I found that very interesting. I don't know if you know the process, but the cells give off waste products that include the free radicals, and you need a certain amount of antioxidants to balance those free radicals. Otherwise, they become precursors to disease, and you end up with diseases. And in the past, our bodies produced enough of the antioxidants, but with all the pollutants and everything in our environment, that no longer is possible, so that you need to eat plenty of antioxidants. Also, sunscreen is very controversial because of the chemicals in the sunscreen, but I found that the majority of the research does recommend that you use sunscreen when you're out in the sun, especially during the midday sun. Then things that you can do to strengthen the human, and I break this down into the physical and the mental, spiritual categories. Number one, I have nutrition, the fluids that we drink, exercise, supplements. If we take herbs, we need proper rest, we need proper sleep. I believe we need immune builders on a regular basis. And if you smoke, you need to quit smoking, which, as an ex-smoker, before I had lung cancer, I know how difficult that is, but I also know how important that is. Proper nutrition, as I mentioned earlier, reduces your risk by 35%, but exercise, if you exercise 5 days a week for 30 minutes, you reduce your risk by 50%. Examples of proper nutrition, first to avoid would be the standard American diet, which is called SAD, which I think is properly labeled. It has high animal protein and fat, it's high saturated fat and cholesterol, high sugar, high processed foods, low in complex carbohydrates, and low in vegetables. And usually what scares me is the genetically modified organisms, the pesticides, the growth hormones, and the other pollutants. When I had lung cancer in 1974, I didn't have to worry about those. But now, when I talk with people that have cancer, I recommend, if possible, to eat organic or at least locally grown, where you know the farming practices of the person that you're buying from. So you should use organic, non-GMO, pesticide and pollutant-free, especially fresh fruit and vegetables, and especially raw. And when I had lung cancer, my doctor prescribed 75% raw fruit and vegetables. There's a rationale for that, and if you're interested, you can come and talk with me after, and I'd be happy to share with you. There's a rationale for every piece of the treatment regime that the doctor prescribed, who prescribed only the physical, not the mental, spiritual, which is typical of doctors today also. But there was a rationale for everything he told me, and in some instances, things that he was using in practice were 40 years ahead of the research. And I review research every Sunday of natural treatments for cancer, and I came across research that showed that what he was doing 40 years ago has now been proven by research, which I think is amazing for some of the doctors that were out there working. You should use a good source of, as far as the diet, I'm vegan, and when I had lung cancer, my doctor put me on a vegan diet. I have a radio show, and I interview a lot of the leaders in research and in alternative health. Dr. Eshelstein, who is one of the leading cardiologists in the country, he recommends a vegan diet and says that if you use the vegan diet, his diet, which is a little more strict than what I could follow, because it even eliminates avocados. But he says if you follow his diet, you won't have further heart problems. I've interviewed the leader in Alzheimer's, in multiple sclerosis, someone who has developed the mimicking fasting diet, and many of the people that I interview recommend the vegan diet, or some alteration of it. Now, I know even in cancer, some of them use the ketogenic diet, which eliminates most of the carbohydrate, which I don't agree with. I think that it's not balanced enough. But there's disagreement among doctors about that, so I guess I can disagree also. You need a good source of fat, and what I use is extra virgin organic olive oil. If it's low heat, or if I eat vegetables, I usually put that on. I don't use butter and things like that. If I'm using high heat, I use coconut oil. I avoid canola oil because 90% of the canola oil is genetically modified. So I pretty much avoid that. And you'll have to look at everything because potato chips, many of these things use canola oil. You need to eat antioxidants, anti-inflammatories. You need to avoid farm-grown seafood because of the toxins. You need to avoid large fish because the large fish eat the smaller fish and the smaller fish eat the smaller fish. And at each level, it increases the amount of mercury that you take in so that the large fish have the highest amount of mercury. Some examples of spices as a way of strengthening the body against cancer. Garlic. Garlic is wonderful because it builds the immune system. If I start to get scratchy in my throat and I feel like a cold's coming on, I up my garlic, I up my zinc, and I up my vitamin C. And the next day, it's all cleared up. So I almost never have a cold anymore. And it's a big thanks to garlic. I don't smell too good, but I live alone, so no one seems to care. But garlic has been found to kill cancer cells in lab studies. It may reduce the risk of cancer in prostate, stomach, colorectal cancer, and has other health benefits for the prostate. Turmeric, another excellent spice that reduces the risk of some cancers. In one study, they looked at 25 cancer patients who had precancerous changes in organs. The curcumin or curcumin stopped the changes before they became cancer. And I mentioned my doctor being so progressive. This does the same thing that my doctor prescribed high-dose vitamin A for. I took 200,000 international units the first week, 100,000 the second, and then 50,000 for a year. And the normal recommended daily allowance is 5,000. So I told my doctor that I was concerned about this because vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin and the excess is stored in the fat. And he said, well, you don't need to worry about it because I'm going to give you high-dose vitamin E. And I said, yeah, but vitamin E is another fat-soluble vitamin. And he said, it'll be all right, and everything was fine. But if people want to follow my protocol, and I get a lot of people that are interested in following it, I recommend that they have either a naturopathic doctor or a nutritionist that they work with through the process, partly because of the vitamin A, because it is at a dangerous level to be taking it, but with me it didn't seem to affect my liver at all. Another study they did was looking at cancer rates in different countries that consumed different amounts of turmeric. And they found that those who eat higher amounts of turmeric, especially between 100 and 200 milligram, had lower cancer rates than in the countries where they ate lower amounts of turmeric. And another study was animal studies that showed turmeric may prevent cancer of the colon, stomach, and skin in rats exposed to carcinogens. Other things that you do to strengthen the body are the mental, spiritual interventions. things like affirmations, compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, which has become a big thing recently, faith, meditation, optimism, prayer, relaxation, visualization. And there is so much research going on currently in these areas. On my radio show, I've interviewed the head of the Forgiveness Project. I think it's at Stanford. I've interviewed the head of the Gratitude Project nationally, and several. I've interviewed someone at Duke who is head of the religion department, but is very liberal as far as, he's a nurse, by the way, that started out as a nurse and is now one of the top people in as far as religion in the country. And the research really is showing the effect of the mental, spiritual on the physical. And a good example is forgiveness. 61% of cancer patients have a problem with forgiveness, and 50% of those are severe. And what happens if you don't forgive is that you develop anxiety, then you deplete the killer cells in the body so that you're less able to deal with the cancer. And if you do forgive, you have a higher self-esteem, you have lower stress, lower blood pressure, improved immune system functioning, and so forth. What is interesting is, let me see, I had a every once in a while I have a senior moment, and so I've got to think, what was the forgiveness thing that I found so exciting? I'll come back to it, because if I focus on something else, it'll come back to me. One thing you can do is use visualization and affirmations, and this is very useful for dealing with forgiveness issues. And what you can do is to visualize the person that you are having a problem with, and you can say, I forgive you, whoever the person is, for whatever, and then visualize the person responding in a positive way, and you do this over and over, not just a one-time thing. One thing that I like, and this I believe came from Louise Hay initially, and it is, I forgive you for not being the way I want you to be. I forgive you and I set you free, because I think so often we meet people and we want to change them and we want them to be a certain way, but you've got to accept people as they are or move on. Then my foundation, I've included in the book, and it's also on my Cancer Foundation website, many national, international authorities. And in the book, I have links, and so you can go directly to the site where the person is interviewed related to whatever the topic is. And so I've got things like, I've got the person that is the National Authority on Genetically Modified Organisms, one that is an authority on electromagnetic waves. I've got several people in the area of nutrition, including Patrick Quillen, who some of you may know. I've got Faith, I mentioned the physician at Duke, and a lot of others. I've got forgiveness, I've got gratitude, I've got meditation, and many other related topics. Then I wanted to mention, because I find this an exciting test, and I hope that it continues to be a positive test. Dr. SCHANDL spoke yesterday, and I was sorry I missed him, but he has developed a test that will predict with 85 to 95% accuracy up to 8 to 10 years before you develop symptoms or before any other test picks up that you have cancer, which gives you the opportunity then to change your lifestyle and then hopefully have the test again and hopefully avoid or at least have a less severe case of cancer. So and it's very reasonable. When I looked, it was like $300. So it's very reasonable and very affordable. So I thank you very much. And if you want to speak with me, I'll be over by the bookstore.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. Do you have books here to sell? Okay. Okay. But spend some time over at the bookstore. All right. Thank you very much. Very happy to have you. You're looking good. It's amazing what some health and nutrition can do for people.